Okay, so we're Comp 1050 Animation 2D Tools, and it's week 6, part 1. And we're kind of building on what we talked about last week with the game elements. What we're going to do is we're going to use this matching game this week to kind of describe, to develop a basic game framework with Flash and Actionscript. So what I'd ask you to do is follow along. Again, this is kind of a follow along as opposed to a watch and listen tutorial. What I would ask you to do first is pull up Flash, and in your code archive folder, there's something called matching game, which we're going to start looking at, matching game 1.fla. If you start there, I'm going to analyze the code with you as we go to explain different parts of it. Now, if you're very much inclined to do this on your own at this stage, you could start with matching game 1 and modify the code as we go until you get to matching game 10, which we're going to actually go through 10 different iterations of this FLA document, right? And this is actually what I would expect from you when you're building your game. Part of it is I haven't asked for version control for your game. Your first project, I said I'm not asking you for version control. But that doesn't mean that I'm not looking for versioning, right? So your version control marks are going to be in your internal documentation, right? That's where it comes down to. So I'm asking you to put down each version of the game. So every time you save and make a new version, we're going to see here what each version means. There's an opportunity for you to record another version of your game. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to go through this, the first part, which is, like I said, just going to pull this down here for a second. We're going to start off with matching game. Just a moment here. And we're in the lesson 6 archive here. Lesson 6, week 6. Matching game 1, FLA. Yes?
Would this be similar to the one we did in Android?
We did something like this in Android, but we used in Android, in another course for advanced Java, what we ended up doing was we used actual card faces, right? And we use different assets for each of the cards. In this particular case, we're going to do it a different way. We're going to use a matching game, but we're going to use, you're going to see it's actually really cool. What we're going to do, as opposed to making more than one file, we're going to use one file with multiple frames, one movie clip with multiple frames, and each frame is going to be a different card.
All right.
Different framework, but kind of the same thing. In fact, the matching game that we're going to see is very similar to what we did in Android. The difference is, I want to show you this lesson today is going to do a couple of things. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to talk about placing interactive elements. We're going to talk about gameplay. And then we're going to talk about something called encapsulating the game. So that part 3 of today's lesson, when we talk about encapsulating the game, you need this part to do your project number 1. Right? So this is one potential solution to doing an intro screen, right, and a game end screen, as well as an encapsulated game or level, if you will. So we're going to talk about this very, very carefully. So there's some really good stuff in this lesson, and for those of you who were not here, who are watching the video, woe is you, because I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions today, and lots of complexity around how to build this. Even though we're doing a matching game, you can apply the same principles as we're going to see to this top-down adventure game that I'm asking you to build. So let's take a look. So we're going to build our first game. It's going to be a matching game. And the idea for people who don't know what it is you got cards face down in a random arrangement on the board, right? When 2 cards match, they're removed, right? That's the game. If they don't match, they're turned face down again. And then a good player is someone who can remember where the card positions were that didn't match, and then he can quickly match them, okay? So how we're going to do this, we're going to break it down into several steps. We're going to work on placing the cards on the screen, right? We need to shuffle the deck. We have to kind of create that opportunity to do that. And we're going to take the player's input and use it to reveal different pictures on the board, okay? And then we're going to turn the cards back to their face down values if it's not a match. Okay, so let's take a look and see how we do that. So the first thing we need to do is create a set of cards. Now, The example we have in matchinggame1.fla is a group of pictures that are provided by the book author. Again, we're using Game University version 2 for this particular set of exercise files. Actually, it's a really good little book. I recommend it. It's in your syllabus as well. So again, we need to use pairs of cards. So even though we're doing 36 cards, there's really only 18 pictures, right? So we have 18 pictures, 36 cards, so 2 pictures are the same on the board, just like we did in the other course, except, again, we're going to put them in random locations every time. Okay, so there's a couple ways we can do this. So here's one suggestion. So we're building this game. We're trying to visualize how to put this game together. So one way we do is multiple symbols, right? We can make 1 card per symbol as an example, and then in this case we'll have 18 different symbols that we can call upon, right? And each symbol can have its own name and so on, and we can have their own instance, and we can call them up when we want to randomize them and put them on the screen. That's one way to do it. It's good if we have a large group of cards. Like for example, we only have 18 cards, but if we had 18 cards from a group of 100 cards, it might be better for us to use multiple symbols, right? Then there's the single symbol method. So you have, this is the second way of doing it. You have 1 symbol for a whole set of cards, right? And then what you do is each frame contains the graphics for a different card, and one of the frames has the graphic for the card back. Okay, so that's the other way we can do it. And again, you could use different ways of doing this. You could do, symbols. So like it says here. By the way, when I do my my reference cards here, these even though I'm using these PowerPoint slides, consider them reference cards. Like I said, right? So you're going to see these notes in the lining here, so to speak, right? When I say note, even the single symbol method can use many symbols, right? For example, if you're playing cards, our deck of poker cards, you might place the 4 suits, spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs, in symbols and use them in your main deck symbol on the cards. So basically what you do is you embed each of the cards, each of the suits is a symbol, right? And these 4 symbols are inside the actual other symbol, almost like nested symbols. Not a bad idea. But in this particular case, the symbols are going to look like this. These are all the symbols we're going to use. And each symbol is going to be put on a different frame. Okay? So let's take a look at matchinggame1.fla. In order for us to make the symbol accessible, and we're going to see this over and over again, we're going to have to create that Actionscript linkage for the symbol. And if you look, if I go back to Flash for a second, and if I look at the library, the only symbol that I have is called card, right? If I right-click onto it, so I'm right-clicking on the symbol here, and I go to Properties, I have to make sure that this, under the Actionscript linkage section, it has to be clicked on in order for me to use this or access it with Actionscript. If it's not clicked on, I have no access to it whatsoever. Okay. This is a good thing. So here's my card, right? So I'm actually creating this card class. That's what we're going to be creating, right? But what's happening is that in this particular case, we're not really building a complicated card class in this particular instance. So that what's happening is the matching game is only going to use an instance that's created by Flash. Okay, that's one. Second thing is this. When we look at this, the actual card symbol, if I double-click the card symbol here, right, and then I notice there's a bunch of symbols here. If I want to look at the actual symbols in here, there's a different way I can look at it. If I go to the right here, where I see this little pull-down menu, right? Right now, I'm looking at it at normal view, right? I can actually see it in preview mode. And then if I see it in preview mode, I can actually look at the symbols frame by frame. So this is looking at it in preview mode, right? So then I'm moving the red bar here. I'm moving it, and I can actually see all the symbols. These are all the images that are embedded in each of the frames, right? When I click onto here, we have a little symbol, and the symbol itself not only has, or a little icon, if you will, a little graphic. The graphic has a couple of things here, if you notice. You have a square, right? A rectangle, a very simple background, right? The background doesn't change. This is the background. And then on top of that, you have a foreground. The foreground is the shape of the same size of the card. So each one of these symbols, or each one of these card graphics, right, is embedded in each of the frames. So if I move to a different frame in my card symbol, I can actually pull up the graphic for that particular card. That's all I'm doing. Okay? Are you guys all with me? This is kind of like one way of doing it. Okay. So we're all good. So first thing, we've linked it together. Actionscript is also going to pull up a thing that says, hey, if you don't have this thing defined, if you create a linkage to the symbol for the first time, if you go back to this screen here, it's going to say, a definition for this class could not be found in the class path, so one will be created for you. Right, kind of thing. Is that okay? And if you say okay, it's going to create this temporary class, if you will. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create an Actionscript 3 class. Okay? When we do that, we want to call it matching game 1. We want to call the class matching game 1, and we want to save it as matchinggame1.as for Actionscript. Back to Flash. So here's my properties for my document, and if you under document class, you have, if I actually click here, this is another way to do it, right? In this little pencil, it'll pull up my document, my matchinggame1.as file, right? Now it's going to ask me here because again on my machine, right? If you notice, I have Flash Builder, right? So because I have Flash Builder, it's saying, hey, do you want to open this up in Flash Builder, or do you want this to be opened up in Flash Professional? So because all of you have Flash Builder, I'm guessing none of you do, right? I'm going to open it up in Flash Professional. Now I've already got some stuff in here. We're going to discuss what's in here in a second, but we're going to follow along the PowerPoint presentation to go through this. The other thing is I want to switch back to normal view in a second. So I want to go back to matching game 1. And instead of looking at my timeline in preview mode, I want to look at it in normal view. So it's a compressed time frame. Okay. So I've connected my class. When I do that, it gives me, Flash gives you, not the one that you saw, but it gives you this, a package definition, right, with 2 curly braces, right? That's your package. It also creates, it doesn't put the import statement in right away, but it does create this public class with the same name, a public function with the same name as the class that extends movie clip. That's what you want to put in there. You want to extend movie clip. And what it is this public class matching game 1 is the class definition for the name of the file, right? So the name of the file and this class file have to match. In addition, it also provides this public function matching game 1, right? A public function with that returns void. That is your constructor. So this is the constructor of your class. So now we're doing, instead of doing before up until this point, we've been using Actionscript that exists in the frame and in the timeline on a particular frame, right? Now we're not doing that anymore. Now the Actionscript is going to exist in its own file, which is more like traditionally what we've been doing in other languages. Okay? So here's Actionscript in its own file. In order for us to actually use the display list or have display elements like a movie clip, we have to import flash.display.star, which actually takes the entire display library and imports it in for our particular movie. Next. So we're going to move to the initialization function, which is also called the constructor. So in Flash or Actionscript, the initialization function is another name for the constructor function or constructor method, which you've heard about in other languages. We can put a void after it to tell that Flash is returning nothing, but we can also leave the void off the functions. If we do, the default is that it's not returning anything, right? I'd like you to put the void, the colon void on your functions, right, as we program. Okay? we're going to make the grid 6 by 6, which means we need 2 nested for loops, one for the outside and one for the inside. So here we have it. We have a nested for loop. We're making a function called matching game 1. That's the constructor, or the initialization function. And we're going to create this nested for loop. For var, we're going to define our variable x, which is a UI int. It's a positive integer, right? Equals to 0, and we're going to say as long as x is less than 6, keep incrementing x plus plus. And we're going to do the same thing for y. Here's the problem with this. I really, really don't like x's and y's inside for loops. I've left it this way, but what we're going to do is we're going to modify this code because I really think it sucks, right? And I really think it sucks because, like I said before, it's poor form for us to have x's and y's in a function or in a for loop that can define rows and columns, right? So again, we have the first is the column. The x is representing the column, and the y is the row. So what's wrong with saying changing the x and calling it, column index, right? And that's what it should be. So here's our column index, and if our column index is there, it's got to be here and here. Yes, it makes it longer, but it's more descriptive, right? So that's column index 52, and so on. And the same thing goes for row index. Y then should be row index, right? That's a better variable name than x's and y's, and I disagree with that. That's one thing I don't agree with this book. It kind of provides these simple x and y for your variables, and I think you can be very much more creative and more contextual when we put things together. So we're creating this for loop. Let's go back. That's the first thing. The first thing we got to put this for loop in play, and now what we got to think about it is that the cards, right? Each card is 50 by 50, all right? And we want to kind of leave a 2-pixel border between, which means each column has to be 52 pixels. 50 for the card plus 2 pixels for the space between cards, right? That's what we're doing. So basically what we do is we multiply the x and y values by 52. So we're actually adding 2 pixels between from the columns and 2 pixels between each row. We could change this value, and as an example, instead of 52 for the how big the card is, we could change it to whatever you like, some other value. Because 52 is the size of the card, but what if we want to make cards that are bigger in the future? We want to be more flexible there. So we should have card sizes as opposed to as a constant, which we're going to get to in a second. So once we've defined in the nested for loop here, right, we're defining a couple things. One is we're adding in a card. For the particular card we're looking at, we're adding in the stop command, right? Why are we putting the stop command in for the card? Every time we produce a card, right, well, what I'm saying is this card, we're defining a new variable. Here's a new variable, and we're defining new cards, right? For every card, that's what this is saying. This card is equal to card, right? I'm taking my card symbol, right? And I want to place a stop command at each of the cards. Why am I doing that? Anybody who's following along and not playing games or something else? We put the stop in there because if we don't put the stop command in the card for each of the cards, it'll play the entire movie. Each card is a movie clip. So in other words, wherever I start looking at the card, it'll just go through the entire timeline. It won't stop. It'll look, because remember, a movie clip will play when we test our movie. So that's the first thing. We implement a stop. And the second thing we do is we say, well, the x and y values of the card itself. So that's going to be where, what the card is going to be placed. And then we're going to add the card, this card, we're going to add it to the stage. That's what we're going to do with this add child, this card. Now, right now, which value, which face am I showing on the card? Because I haven't mentioned it and I put a stop on the card, it's going to go to frame 1, right? Frame 1 is the black, the back part of the card. Let's take a look. So here, going back to my main library here, and if I double click on the card, here we are. If I move this red time bar back, it shows that the first symbol or the first graphic that's on the first frame is a black background. Now I think it's a pretty boring background, guys. I'll be honest with you. And I want to change this thing, right? So if I want to change this symbol, what could I do? I could modify the symbol right here. I could add a polka dot in there or something, right? And I encourage you to be more creative than putting a simple black background, right? Like for example, if I wanted to add in a polystar, I use the polystar tool, right? So here's my polystar tool, and I'm going to add in. Let me just change the. Go in here, okay? And I'm going to make it a little bit. Oops. Let's change that again. Let me use the polystar tool, like I said. Here's the polystar tool, and my background, instead of it being green, I'm going to change the. I'm going to make that there's not going to be any stroke, so the stroke is going to be nothing. And for the polystar, I'm going to make the fill white, just to make it whatever it is. I'm going to put this weird symbol in the middle of the card. Okay, that's not what I intended to do. I'm going to double click on this whole thing and move the symbol. Why did I do that again? Oh yeah, because I'm making it a graphic. And of course, because I put it right there, let's try that again. It ate up the card. That's not what I wanted. So here's the tool. Here it is. And I'm going to put the graphic, make it a little smaller actually. Let's try that a little smaller. There it is. And put this thing right in the middle. That's not what I wanted. I want to put this thing right in the middle. There it is. So I got to get this weird graphic for the card now, as opposed to, and you can change whatever you want. Now this will only be good for this movie. The next movies are all going to be back to black, right? But there's a reason why I'm doing this, because I think it's pretty boring the other way. So I've kind of got this graphic, and the first card for the back is going to be this graphic that's going to come up. This little symbol. Can someone grab that? Can you grab the doorman? It's way too loud. Okay. So what we should normally get is this grid right here that we see here on the PowerPoint slide, right? But now that I've changed the graphic, and if I run the Flash, I'm going to get this. Right? So it looks like a bunch of card backs. Right now, clicking on them doesn't do anything, right? Because I haven't added that functionality to this movie. All I've done is created card backs by doing a nested for loop, one for columns and one for rows, and I've kind of placed the symbol, the same symbol, which is the first frame of that symbol on every inside the grid, in this 6x6 grid. It's kind of a first step. All right, and I've connected it by, again, I've added this matching game 1 without the AS inside the document class. Now we did it different ways here. You could do it like this. Let's go back out to Flash for a second. Okay. I'm going to save this. Okay, and I'm going to go out for a second, and I'm going to create a new file. Take a look. So here's my new Actionscript file. Boom, I created. And now I want to create a new file. I'm going to make a symbol. So let's add a symbol to the movie. Right, this is a brand new file. I'm adding a symbol that looks like this. Okay, and it's white. Let's just try that again. A green symbol that looks like that. There we go. Here's a green symbol. All right, and right now this is going to be my ship. It's it looks beautiful, doesn't it? It's green, right? It's a beautiful green ship. And let's add some other details to it just to make it less boring. So I will go and add an oval. And the oval is going to be, I don't know, red. And I put the oval in the back of the ship. So we know this is the command part of the ship. There we go. So red oval, that's going to be the dot of the ship itself. And maybe we add some more descriptive things here, right, for the ship. I'll keep it the stroke the same. I'll add in a couple of dots here so we know this is the front of the ship. Maybe a tank. Okay, there we go. And it's going to take away, yeah, I thought so. We'll leave it like that. So it's kind of a weird little ship. And I'm going to make this whole thing a group. And then from the group itself, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to create a symbol. And I'm going to call this my tank, or just tank. That's the kind of ship I think I'm going to make. I have to click this export for Actionscript in order for me to make my tank accessible. So I'm going to put that there. Press OK. It's going to say, hey, guy, you're adding a class we don't know anything about. Do you want to keep it? I say yes. And now here's my tank, right? Now that I've created my symbol, it's in my library. Here's tank, right? So in here, I can just go in here and just remove it. But I still have it in my library as tank, right? If I want to use my ActionScript now, I create an ActionScript class, and I want to call it tank, right? My tank class as my ActionScript class. I could do that here, but it doesn't make any sense. Maybe I want to call it tank game, which makes more sense, right? Now I don't have a document called tank game in my document for this particular file I'm just putting together really quickly, right? If I click here, the little pencil, it's going to say, hey, there's no definition for tank game. Do you want to create one? I say yes. It does. It creates a tank game. And I also want to do the same thing. I got my tank, and I got my tank game, and now I want to edit it. And if I click onto it, it's going to say, hey, do you want to modify it in Flash Professional or Flash Builder, right? And I say, yeah, Flash Professional is fine. I press OK. And this is what it does. It creates a stub for me, like it talked to me before. So now I've got this thing. Instead of making a matching game, I've got tank game. And inside my constructors where all the stuff is going to happen, so maybe inside here is where I want to define where tank is going to go. So first I want to define a tank. So my tank, right, I want to make it of class of type tank, which I've created, is equal to new tank, right? Because that's the new symbol that I'm creating, first thing. Then I want to give it an x and y coordinate. So my tank x is equal to, I'm going to give it an actual value, 150 pixels, and my tank y, right, is equal to 150 pixels. And I'm going to add child. I'm going to go stage dot add child, right, my tank, right? So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to call this thing tankgame.as. Tankgame.as. Save. I'm going to save it. I'm also going to save my my file save as, and I'm going to call it tankgame.fla just to keep it copacetic, and press save. So here's my tank game that I've created. Now, there's nothing on the stage. I don't have anything inside my timeline, and all I've done is linked a tank game class. I don't have anything here. If I go to my ActionScript, my actions panel, there's nothing in here because I don't have anything in my actions panel anymore. It's inside a separate file called tankgame.as. So we're actually creating classes for the first time here today. That's why it's an important day. If I run the file, right, I got my tank game, my tank that appears in the middle of my screen, right? It's ugly, but it works, right? And now that I have my symbol up there, that once I put my symbol in there, I can go back to my tank game class and I can start manipulating it with some kind of event listener. Like example, I could say, I want to add an event listener when I click on my tank. Let's say now my tank has to be clicked on for it to do something. So my tank dot add event listener, and if I want to add in some code hinting, that's what I want to do. My tank dot add event listener, and then maybe what I want to do is a mouse click event. So mouse event, right? Again, I want to add in some code hinting. I turn it on. Mouse event. Here it is. Right? Dot click. Right, and I want to kind of create a tank clicker function, right? So var, and here's my function, right? Actually, I should just go function, And what I want to do actually maybe is make it a private function because it's only going to be available in my class, and I don't want to do it here. So I'm doing it in my public. I'm doing it in my public constructor. I don't want to make another function in my constructor. I could, but that's silly. I'd want to do it outside of my constructor, which is right here. So private, right? Tank clicker. Did I do this right? Yeah. Tank clicker, and I'm going to actually have it take a mouse click, right? So event, and then again, if I want to kind of use my my code hinting, I want to do a mouse event, right? Mouse event, and I want to return void, right? I could leave that blank, but I'm not going to. And now my tank clicker, when it's clicked on, it's got to do something. Maybe I'm just going to do a trace statement for now. So trace, you clicked my bloody tank. All right, you click my bloody tank. Okay, so every time I click on it, I'm going to save it, I'm going to run it, and then it gives me an error. It says, hey, it says, remember, here's tank clicker, here's my private tank clicker event, but I didn't tell it it's a function. Gotta do that. Let's try that again. Here's my tank clicker, click on it, hey, you click my bloody tank, you click my bloody tank, you click my bloody tank. I'll keep doing it over and over again. So I've created a button. Right? My tank is actually a button, not anything else. The reason why I'm showing you this is because this is an external file for the class as opposed to the actions panel, which is how we're going to be going from now on. We're not going to use the actions panel very often. We might at times if it makes sense to us, if it's easier for us to do it, if it's going to add value, we're going to use the actions panel. But if it doesn't add any value, we're going to use an external file. It's going to be called whatever the file name you want to choose. And usually it's related to the type of your document, .as for Actionscript. Okay, going back to the PowerPoint presentation, it's killing all this stuff. And opening up the last thing we opened up, which was matching game1.fla. I'm going to modify this thing here, right, which is what we're looking at right now, this card.stop. All we've done here is we've added in a nested for loop for column and row indexes to produce the card backs like that look like this now because we modified the cards, right? That's all we've done. Okay. So this is matching game1.fla. We're going to stop it here before we move on to the next part.